Right, hi everyone, just getting plugged in. Oh. Okay. Oh, everyone managed to get breakfast. That's quite impressive. Okay. Right. Just Michael's gone. Okay. I have tried to unmute everyone who wants to be unmuted. So should let you, as far as I know. Ah, hello, Michael. Okay, let me just do the Facebook.
Why am I on mute? Anyone?
Sorry?
Why was I on mute when I came in?
I don't know. I think it mutes people automatically on entry. Probably does, because otherwise what happens is we'll be in the middle of something and someone just comes on and doesn't realize they're not on mute. Probably. It's nothing personal. Okay, we're just publishing, going to Facebook, 1 second. I am going to mute everyone in a minute because I can hear everyone eating their breakfast, which is fine with me, but it might make it slightly noisy. Okay, so let's share this.
Woodford Forest Show is live. Good to know.
Is indeed. I haven't yet figured out a quick my page. I have to do it
You're frozen, Rabbi.
myself, so just wait a second. Yeah, I know, my computer's slow. Okay, fine. Am I back? Okay, got to start. Apologies, I have to leave 5 minutes early. Probably get to a Tahara. So, okay, morning all. I will just wait for that to come through.
Oh yes, yeah. All finished?
Yeah.
Is he doing the talk?
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'll just mute everyone for now,
No,
except
Tanya
Howard, because
Tanya's
Howard
not
can't
interested
unmute
in
himself.
Right.
Oh, 1 second. Yes, okay. So I've muted everyone except Howard because he can't unmute himself. Howard, you're still on. Please feel free to unmute yourself. It's not personal. It just makes it easier to follow for now. Okay, so we learned about the 10 Sfirot, and now we're learning about the levels of the soul. Question was asked last week, so I'm just going to switch my light on. Oh, no, forget it. Question was asked last week. How the soul levels work. Is it like, I don't know, A levels or music exams, you pass and you move on to the next level? So my understanding is it's somewhat fixed. So we're talking about different dimensions that every person, except maybe some very exceptional people, but every person basically has. And within that, you have certain abilities, or you basically, a fundamental belief of Baal Shem Tov was that we are all intrinsically holy. So it's not that some people are more holy than others, but some people are more in tune with it than others. Probably heard of the analogy of the diamond that needs polishing, which has to be used carefully because not everyone likes being told they're a rough diamond. But if expressed correctly, it's a very nice idea that everybody's intrinsically worth infinite value. Sometimes that value doesn't shine as clearly as it would if it was more polished and more refined, but the essential intrinsic value is the same. So that's my understanding, and I've tried to do a bit of research on this. It's a bit shaky. Perhaps we need a mystic to help us. It's not me. But my understanding is that's kind of how the soul levels work. So whereas, for example, when we're talking about the Beinoni and the Rosh and the Tzaddik, there's a spectrum, and people can very much move along that spectrum. When it comes to levels of the soul, it's a bit like saying everyone has 2 arms, 2 legs. Well, most people have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, ears, and a nose. Certainly you can, physical fitness you can improve if you eat carrots, makes your eyesight better, supposedly. I don't know, whatever. If you work out, obviously you'll have bigger muscles, or you'll be more capable, you'll be faster, but you basically have some relative framework of what a human being is and what the body is. So the soul also has a framework of different parts to it, which have different levels of consciousness, essentially, of godliness. So the lowest level, we already said, is very much in this physical world. The nephesh, which actually means is from the root of the word to breathe. It says that God breathed life into us, so it's the most physical manifestation of godliness. And I think whether you're a great tzaddik or you're somebody who doesn't even realize your potential, should we say that? There's a nice way of saying a Russia. You're going to have that soul level. Now, it might not be as finely tuned, basically. Phrase that I keep seeing everywhere, which seems to have replaced unprecedented as an unprecedented number of times it's been used, is the phrase tone deaf, right? Everyone's nice, a trendy phrase. Yeah, you know, people talk about people being tone deaf. So, like, if you make a comment which is insensitive to the tensions of society, for example, an off-the-cuff comment, then you're tone deaf. I don't know if anyone saw this story, but the mayor of Barnet, a bit silly, this, don't agree with it, started the campaign Religious Lives Matter. Did anyone see this story? Brian Gordon, because he thinks our schools should open again. It's discriminatory that they're closed, and so he's taken the phrase Black Lives Matter and he's called it Religious Lives Matter. So he was accused of being tone deaf. Right? I think there's two issues with what he said. Number one, I think that's a fair comment. It's not a wise appropriation. And number two, it's not clear that our schools being closed is detrimental to us right now. Anyway, right. So we have different levels of sensitivity. I've just muted you, Howard, because I can hear you breathing very loudly. Sorry. So we have different levels of sensitivity, but it doesn't change necessarily the essence of who we are, if that makes any sense. But we may be more or less in tune to it. That's probably a very Kabbalistic Baal Shem Tov view. There might be other views that say that if a person, you know, is transgressing the Torah, then basically they're wearing down their soul and whatever. I mean, maybe it's just worth referencing the Jewish view of heaven and hell, because it's very much ties into this. We know probably that the reason we say, first of all, why do we say Kaddish only? Why do we mourn for a year? In terms of, obviously in terms of grief and psychology, it's one thing, but in terms of the person's soul, surely it should be an eternity that we should try to elevate a person's soul. Why do we do it for a year? So there's this idea that for the first year, a person is judged. At the end of that year, the judgment is sealed and they basically enter heaven. And we get on with our lives. And every year on the yacht site, we do things. There's no question, by the way, that it's always meritorious to do things, particularly for a parent in their memory, right? Particularly charitable things, because it's always as a chus, it's always a merit for them. It always brings, purely in secular terms, brings honor to see that we are honoring our parent. You don't have to believe in God to see that if you name something after a parent or you donate something in memory of a parent, that it keeps their memory alive and, you know, their values alive. But the first year is particularly poignant, and the first 11 months, of course, we say Kaddish. And you may be aware, it's going to be a question that comes up. If we haven't managed to say Kaddish every day, should we carry on into the last month when we go back to shul? We'll have to look into that. I sometimes wonder that with regard to those who come shul once a week and say Kaddish. Because the idea is that for the first 11 months, we say Kaddish, amongst other things, for our loved ones, to elevate their soul. And for the 12th month, we make a point of not doing it. Why? Because we don't want to somehow imply, it's all about optics. A lot of things Judaism about optics. We don't want to somehow imply that the only merit this dear relative has is our Kaddish. And if it wasn't for that, they'd be in shtuk. So the last month, they stand on their own merit. The 12th month, we don't say Kaddish for them. What's going on during that year? So basically, somebody once said it's like being on the top or bottom of the bus. If you're on top of the bus, you can see where you're going. You have a better view. If you're on the bottom of the bus, you've got no idea. You can't see as much. You can't always. But then if you're on the top, you can't see the driver. So there's different advantages. But you end up at the same destination. So according to Kabbalistic tradition, everyone except the most wicked of the wicked, and the Talmud does speak about one or two, I think Bilam possibly, who's in eternal damnation. I think one of the uncensored versions of the Talmud possibly suggests that a certain gentleman who I'm constantly being reminded was Jewish and therefore I should read the Gospels by well-meaning Christians, possibly also didn't end up with such a happy ending, but that got censored from a lot of versions for obvious reasons. Don't quote me on that. But by and large, most people make it into heaven. So the only question is how quickly you get there. Do you go straight up there, or do you need some deprogramming and sort of briefing first, or cleansing, if you like? And some of the cleansing might be slightly unpleasant for your soul. So, but you end up in heaven at the end of it. So in Judaism, the soul is essentially relatively pure, and if it gets sullied, then we clean it up. It doesn't basically mean all is lost. So I think in that regard, when we talk about souls, and not that I'm a great expert, but souls and soul levels, they are relatively sort of not static. They're obviously dynamic, but it's there, and it's how we nurture it that's the big question. If that makes any sense. If you have any, sorry, I'm going to unmute everyone because everyone seems to finish breakfast now. It gets too noisy. Oh, I can't. Ah. Oh, you're unmuted already. You've muted yourselves, looks like. Okay, if anyone wants to ask a question, please unmute yourself and speak up or put your hand up. Okay, so number 6, if it works. Right, quick recap. There are 5 levels of the soul. In ascending order, the lowest first, Nefesh, which we spoke about, Ruach, which you'll know is a wind or a spirit, so it gives you a clue maybe where it's coming from. Neshama, which is the word we often use for a soul. Chaya, which means life, blood actually, and Yechida, which means singular. Okay, those are the 5 levels. There's my brackets, they went wrong again. But okay, basically the first 3 levels are very much intrinsic to you and individual to you, and the last 2 are more sort of esoteric, generic, communal, if you like. We spoke last week about people having 6 senses, about people in their family and things. So just to recap, the nefesh is very much the physical body and world, right? Let's just remind ourselves once again, can't emphasize it enough times. Judaism is all about the physical. It's about the physical material world around us and how we use it to serve God, right? That's why the Nazir is not the preferred option. Judaism is not about removing oneself from the physical world and avoiding it. Like we just said in the mission earlier about study that's coupled with action, right? Action involves the physical world. Most action, there are very few mitzvahs you can do that don't require living in this world. And the reason that we tuck our sitzit in when we go to a cemetery is because we're going to a place where people can no longer do mitzvot. They say the Vilna Gaon, when he was on his deathbed, the famous leader of 18th century Lithuanian Jewry, he cried and they said, why are you crying? He said, I'm going from a place where I can do mitzvahs every day to a place where I can no longer do mitzvahs. So it's very nice to be in the afterlife, but you can no longer do mitzvahs. So Judaism is about the physical world. It's about engaging with the physical world. If you're at my shir Monday morning, this is one of the problems the spies had, according to the sort of mystical teachings, that they didn't want to go to the land of Israel. They have to start farming, and they'll no longer have manna falling from heaven. They'll have to actually grow their own crops and things. They quite enjoyed having that spiritual utopia, not because of some, selfish motivation, but because they like being close to God. Very nice, but that's not what he wants from us. So the nefesh, the lowest level, is very much in touch with the physical body and the physical world, which obviously comes with its risks of finding the balance between our physical and our spiritual. If we're too physical, then there's something amiss. If we're too spiritual, also it doesn't work. Right? It's the analogy of the kosher animal, which I've used before, that has the split hoof. The hoof connects the animal to the ground. So on the one hand, the person has to be grounded. They said of a certain 2 rabbis, I don't remember who it was, Rebbeim back in the day, Hasidic rabbis that used to learn together. And one of them used to get so lost in his learning that they would have to basically give him some food and say, quick, eat something, in the same way, you say to someone, quick, have some water or something to bring you round if they're passing out. So he was spiritually sort of getting lost and passing out because it was too spiritual. So they had to say, quick, have a bagel, have a bite to eat, have a drink, something to bring you down to earth. We have to be grounded in reality, in the physical material world. So a kosher animal has a hoof that connects it to the ground. It doesn't just fly, no flying pigs for us. However, there's a gap. It's split. Why? Because to be 100% grounded and have no connection above, just be completely practical and realistic and grounded in the material world and are worrying about what's going to happen today is not the Jewish way either. So the Jewish way is a hybrid. It's a balance. Right? Maybe that's why we're also neurotic. Because we're always trying to balance things, balance the good inclination, the bad inclination, balance the physical and the spiritual. Right? We're always trying to balance things in Judaism. But that's the challenge. So it's the split hoof. So the nefesh, the lowest level, which we spoke about last week, is very much connected to the physical body. The ruach, the nefesh, we said, relates to physical action. The ruach relates more to emotion. I don't know what morality means here. I guess sense of right and wrong, conscience, spirit, what drives us to act in a certain way, right? So it's our spirituality, it's our moral grounding, it's our who we are, if you like. right? And we'll come to that in a moment. The neshama, it says, relates more to intellect and the understanding of God, so that's higher still. So it's interesting that emotion is, in order of physicality, you have the physical body and the physical world, you have emotion, then you have intellect. I don't know if, I suppose emotion, maybe it makes sense to most of us that emotion is a more physical manifestation than intellect. Intellect, I think we said this, you can think to yourself, but to chesed, kindness, requires another person. Emotions require another person to share them with or to manifest them to. And then we have the chaya, which is part of God, as it were. I think that's a strange word, but in Hebrew it's kaviyochol. We have to put it because, as we said, you can't divide God into parts. So it's quote unquote a part of God. And Yechidah, which is sublime, which is one with God. We'll come to all of that, so don't worry about that too much. We have a quick look at Ruach for the next 5 minutes. So Nefesh, we said, is related to natural instinct. Ruach, oh, that's the same again. Right, let's move on. Okay. Nefesh, we did. Sorry. Okay. We might have to come back to it, but we did it. Right, what's Ruach? It's in the emotions, we said. Now, people's emotions can be physical, material, but obviously they're a bit more abstract, a bit more esoteric, right? Just like Ruach. Ruach is spirit, it's wind, right? Wind is a Ruach. Right? A wind doesn't have, can cause a lot of trouble, but it doesn't have the same physicality of a solid object. So Ruach is 1 degree removed from the physical body. It's spiritual, right? It's more, interestingly, we often find examples of people who, if they're very spiritually attuned, they are they have fewer physical needs, right? People used to fast a lot, right? The Mojitz Rebbe, a lot of the Mojitz Rebbe, the Mojitz dynasty are very musical. They write a lot of music. You've come across 1 or 2 of their things, because the song that we sing for Ein Kitzur that Rabbi Fleischer sings, Ein Kitzur Lishnoi Secha, is a Mojitz song. A lot of music in the Mojitz dynasty. So they say the Mojitz Rebbe, when he, I think the previous Rebbe, one of their Rebbeim, when he had to have an operation, he asked that a couple of Hasidim should come and sing a very slow, very soulful song, nigun, and it basically put him into a trance. And he did that instead of having an anesthetic, because it was hypnotic, right? It was a spiritual effect. The Bavitcher Rebbe stood for hours receiving people in his 90s, and apparently never needed to rest or stop for a comfort break, because it's not he wasn't human, but when you're more in touch, I guess, with the spiritual, the physical gets slightly lower down the list of priorities, right? I'll give you a simple personal example, and I don't think it's because of some great holy tzaddik, but it's a relatable example, which is going to be a challenge this year. For me personally, although generally, I often come home from, used to, please God soon, come home from Shul on Shabbos morning and say, gosh, I've been standing basically all day. I need to sit, I'm getting older, I need to sit down. Funnily enough, Yom Kippur, I don't notice it. And Ne'ilah, I don't notice it at all. I should be exhausted, but I'm usually exhilarated. I'm on a high. And it's not from taking anything. I do sniff the smelling salts, but I don't think it's from that. It's adrenaline. It's whatever it is. It's a rush. It's an excitement. It's religious fervor. I'm sure it's spiritual as well. It's not just adrenaline. It's not just a hormone. So a person can, by being more in touch with the spiritual, minimize the physical somewhat. So the ruach is the next level. It's not as physical. What do we know about ruach? It's the next level of soul. It's a high level of consciousness than the rank of nefesh. Now, this is slightly contradictory. In terms of physical awareness of the physical world, I guess it's a lower level because it's more removed. But in terms of consciousness of God, it's a higher level. So it's a higher revelation of godliness. It says here it corresponds to the world of Yetzirah, but we didn't learn about worlds yet. So just park that for now. And it says here it's manifest in the emotions. And in terms of divine service, this means to arouse emotions of love and awe of God, right? Which is interesting because we look at mitzvot. Most mitzvot are very physical. We have certain mitzvot which are more abstract, like fearing God and loving God. Are mitzvot, which we're given, but they're much more abstract. They're emotional mitzvot. Or for that matter, not envying people, frankly, okay? Sorry, that's quite quick. So again, there's a lot of text there. Don't worry about all of it. Ruach is more emotional, more spiritual, obviously. It manifests in the emotions, and it's arousing emotions of love and awe of God. Fear, right? Always a good translation there, because fear sounds scary, but of course it's awe. Love and awe of God are aroused how? By contemplating the divine energy, which forms and maintains the world of Yetzirah by observing the self-nullification of the angelic beings in it. Okay, if you can't see the angelic beings in it, that's not going to help you very much. But anyway, contemplating divine energy. So meditating on godliness. We'll come back to that, okay? But just think of that in terms of meditating a bit. So do we have meditation Judaism? Yes, we do. It doesn't involve crossing your legs and going for long periods of time, but it certainly, Tanya does speak about it, involves thinking about the greatness of God, meditating on certain aspects of that. One of the things you may have learned, I can't remember which chapter it's in, so the idea that the sort of contrast between an infinite mighty God who is unlimited and infinitely powerful, and the idea that there's hashgacha pratis, there's individual divine providence, that God cares for each and every one of us. It's the Avinu Malkeinu. I don't know if anyone ever thought about this. We all say Avinu Malkeinu. We sing it. It's one of the most famous songs, probably, in the Jewish lexicon, songbook, whatever. But they're actually completely contradictory things. Avinu is our father. Malkeinu is our king. How you approach your father, how you approach your king are very different, right? Unless you're not a royalist or your father is the king. But the paradigm is very different. A father, you'll bother him with things. You know, can I borrow this? Can I borrow that? Can I have some money for this? Oh, I had a bad day at school. You know, a king, you'll think very carefully about what you're going to say to them. You'll approach them in a certain way. It's completely different. And yet we put them together because there is this paradox. Hashem is our father and our king. So it's something you might meditate on, particularly say Rosh Hashanah time or Yom Kippur time. You're going before a God who on the one hand is all powerful, is King of Kings, and on the other hand takes an interest in each person, like the shepherd counting the sheep that go before him, etc. So one contemplating the divine energy which forms the world of Yetzirah, but in general contemplating God and understanding a bit more about how this world works, as well as other worlds which we will learn about shortly, is a very good way to arouse emotions of love for God. It's a famous thing Moshe Rabbeinu said. How can you command love? You can't command love, right? But you work on it. He said, is it a small thing to love somebody? No, it's not. But you work on it. It grows. So we work on it. We meditate, you think, learn, etc. The intellect may be used on this level of soul, but the primary focus is to arouse emotions. Talmudic sages refer to it as the toil of the heart. That's avodah shebalev, which is also davening, which is basically arousing the emotions in one's heart, the love in one's heart. We're going to see, interestingly, that emotional love and fear might sound great, but it's a lower level. We'll see that a higher level of love and fear is an intellectual one, because presumably an intellectual one will be more grounded. Right? Emotions can be very fickle, particularly if one is hormonal for some reason. Right? So, or one is going through grief, or one is angry. One's emotions are very colored, whereas hopefully one thinks straight more than one sort of applies that to one's emotions, right? Emotions can be very volatile. But this is the next level up, the ruach, the spirit. Right? And most of us, when you talk about spiritual, you don't think great intellect and Torah study. You think about singing or dancing or praying or getting into something that's probably more esoteric than just thinking or learning. Okay, we'll pause there. So we've covered ruach. I know some of this is a bit abstract because we haven't learned about the worlds yet. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Any questions? I'll just try to unmute everyone. No? All meditating?
It still sounds like it's an either-or situation. And getting my head around the fact that you've got a little bit of everything is difficult.
Right. Okay. Fair point. So different levels of conscience. Next question should be, how do we nurture our soul then? So do we nurture our soul through physical mitzvahs? Do we nurture our soul through emotional immersion, singing or meditating or just getting into sort of that kind of thing? Or is it through intellectual? You're right. The answer is all of them. As I said, I wasn't kidding about neurosis. A lot of things in Judaism are a constant balance. The balance between the physical and the spiritual, the balance between good and evil. That's probably why we are neurotic, because we're in this state of flux. And sometimes when it veers off too much, it's not healthy. Love and fear, also a balance, finding that balance. Right? If you're too fearful of God, you'll be neurotic. If you're too loving of God and you don't have the fear, you'll be, like we've said before, the kind of person who can go to a Friday night service, lead a beautiful Friday night service, inspire everybody, or even a Kol Nidre service, and then go off clubbing. I think I once told the story. Somebody I knew who's nowhere in London, and nobody that anyone knows, but he ordered a mail order bride, I think from Thailand actually. Anyway, and he sort of kept her hidden from his mother. Told her that she was a lodger or something. Anyway, he turns up Kol Nidre night at our front door. Our house at the time was right behind the shore. She turns up at the front door and says she's Kol Nidre, knock knock, because the service finished yet. I've come to pick up my, I don't know, she said husband, she said his name. We're going clubbing. So my wife said, are you sure? Because it's a very important night tonight. She said, yeah, no, he told me. Yeah, he said, straight afterwards, we're going clubbing. There you go. So how can you do that? You know, how can you go to Kol Nidre and possibly even daven with great fervor and then go out clubbing? The answer is you have great love of God, you're happy to do all that, but the fear isn't there. It's all, balance comes into it a lot. Definitely. Okay, unfortunately I have to go and do a tahara, so please excuse me. But have a lovely day, folks.
I was just
and
gonna,
see you all tomorrow
can I just,
morning.
one question?
Yeah,
Am I-
yeah.
No, just going from what Graham was saying, really. It sounds like you're elevating the soul. It sounds like it's what we were speaking about with the Bainani. From the Russia, you go to the Bainani, and then if you know, maybe the Sadiq, but that's more extreme. But it sounds like elevation, like you're kind of going up a level. Hello?
I don't know, because if you go back to the list here, where is it? Yeah, if you go back to the list, look at those three. Nefesh relates to, I don't know why it says natural instinct there. It's more the material, physical world. Ruach relates to emotion. Neshama relates to intellect. These are all different modes, different parts of the spectrum of, I don't know, consciousness of God. So Nefesh is the most concealed, the physical world where God is completely hidden. Ruach is more spiritual, where it gets onto one's emotional relationship. Then the Neshama is, why does it say the intellect? Because that's a more permanent kind of awareness, more refined awareness of God. So somehow it's maintaining all of these. It's nurturing all of these. I guess we nurture the lowest level through the physical mitzvot we do, and that's the most basic level. And in the after bracha that we say,
Let me finish this.
the after bracha that we say on a shahakol food, it says, Brain of Hashot Rabot V'Chesranan. We thank God who creates souls of all kinds of things. It's the lowest level, the most basic level of soul, is because it lives in the physical world and does physical mitzvot. And it's always going to live in the physical world as long as we're alive, no matter how holy we are. The Ruach is always going to be this emotional, this love and fear, this more spiritual. You don't necessarily nurture your Ruach by eating kosher food or, I don't know, giving tzedakah. And then the Neshama is already higher than that, is the intellectual understanding and study and awareness of God. I suppose also you can have people who excel in particular levels of soul. So you can have someone who's more in tune with their nefesh, who's very good at practical mitzvot, but not very spiritual, not very connected to sort of understanding of God. You could have someone who has a great intellectual understanding, but doesn't manifest it very emotionally. And you have someone who's very emotional, but doesn't manifest it intellectually. And they're almost exclusive, I guess, in a sense that it's not like the Bainani that he moves up to be a tzaddik or down to be a Rasha kind of thing. It's more like, you know, I don't know, some vitamins will help your whatever, I don't know, your certain parts of your body, and other vitamins will help other parts of your body. It's like exercise, I guess. You know, if you stretch your arms, then it doesn't help your legs particularly. And if you stretch your legs, it doesn't help your arms. So they're mutually exclusive in a sense. It's not one or the other. It's not moving up through different levels. It's a spectrum in the sense, maybe spectrum is not a good example. There are different levels which relate to different ways of connecting. I don't think it is a spectrum. It's the nefesh is this level of the soul, which is understood Kabbalistic. Whether it divides neatly, I don't know, but it's how we understand different facets of the soul, if you like. The Ruach has this facet of the soul, and the Neshama is this facet of the soul. And you have to find a way, no doubt, to nurture them all in different ways, which hopefully we'll talk about in due course. I really have to go, so please excuse me. But I think that's the difference between the Bainani and the Tzaddik in Russia is very much a spectrum where someone sits on that spectrum. This is more like different parts of the soul, and same way you have different parts of the body. You wouldn't say you have a spectrum that ranges from your feet to your shoulders to your head. They all have different purposes. So different soul levels have different purposes and different levels of consciousness in relation to God. Okay, please excuse me, I have to dash. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and see you tomorrow morning.
Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, David.
Thank you.
In Venice? Venice? No.
Paris.
He's on mute.
Where are you?
Paris.
Oh, Paris. Right. Okay, very nice.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Excuse me.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone.